We are back in the studio in the upper room.
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen.
Welcome to Agency Exposed.
So, Brad,
today's show.
you went mountain biking this weekend.
Yeah, I did. I go quite a bit.
Tell everyone why it was so hard.
Oh boy. Oh man.
Did you spend more time on your bike this time, or
Yes,
on the
I did
ground,
not fall.
or?
I did not get hurt, and I just hurt my pride. I took anybody who bikes. I took my bike off. I take my tire off when I put my bike in
You know
the
they
car.
sell bike racks that go to the back.
I
of the
have
car.
one.
You don't have to take.
No,
the
I
tire
have
off.
one, but it's easier it's harder to put the bike rack on than it is to put the bike in the back by myself. So I took the front tire off and I accidentally once my front tire off, my disc was out of my brakes. I have hydraulic brakes, and I hit the brake by accident. And that's like a no-no, because then the pistons come out, and the only way to you have to have a tool to kind of reset it. And I don't have the tool. So I put my tire back on when I got out of the car once I got to the location. And I went like almost 10 miles, and then I realized that
Your brake was on the whole time.
it's like having a little bit of your brake on the whole way, even though I didn't even notice it.
You know,
And
when
I was wondering why things were really tough at like mile 6. I was feeling it, and I'm like, what? It's only mile 6.
How did you finally discover that it
Once
was?
I got back to the car, and I'm like, I picked up my front end, and I spun my front tire, and it immediately just stopped because the brake was a little bit on, and I realized that I was
So you got a
I
good
was
workout.
an idiot. I did. I got a really good
workout.
workout. Yeah, I don't think I felt so. I mean, I've literally felt exhausted for the last day and a half.
when you came in and said you did something stupid, I thought you were going to say you jumped off a cliff.
No,
or
no,
you
no,
did
no.
something.
I didn't fall or anything this
Because
time.
you have done those kind of things.
I do. I do stupid things on bikes.
That's great. Well,
Yeah.
cool.
I think I'm just clumsy.
Well, in the future, you know how to get a good workout if you needed a little
That's
extra
right.
push.
That's right. I need new brake pads now, but no,
Yeah.
I don't. They're
No?
still good.
They're good.
I think,
They're good.
yeah.
That's good. So today, we want to talk about, I think, capacity, right?
Well, yeah, I was thinking, I talk to a lot of agencies, and even in our business,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you guys, but one of the most challenging business problems is scale. Scaling, and scale gets thrown around, but specifically, how do you deliver more without reducing quality
Mm.
for the same or only marginally more resources, right? As most agencies are, it's just a 1-to-1 ratio. They just add people as they add projects, and it just kind of goes up, linearly. And so I want to talk about capacity. Like, how do you guys feel like how do you increase capacity safely? And how do you guys think about capacity, and how do you get the most out of people? And do you feel like you have a healthy capacity for the work that you do?
Mm. Man, I think this is the tough one. Like, this is what every business owner tries to do and struggles. So I think and I know we struggle, and I think it comes down to a couple of things. I think it's first being able to understand what part of your business is you could actually automate, you could streamline, what part of your businesses you could that are more commodity focused, which every business does have commodity business that they sell at some level. And how do you automate, and at the same time, how do you create creativity, right?
Room for it.
Yeah.
Because it costs time.
Yeah.
right?
And how do you create quality that is the same or better than like a human person doing the same job or whatever? I think
AI.
AI. I think I beat this to death, but it's this idea that, your business is run by processes, and people run the processes.
Amen.
Right. And my CPA always says that. It's funny. He's into
I
that.
got someone in my life.
We had him on the show.
Yeah,
saying that to
he's
me
awesome.
My
Yeah.
whole life too.
Yeah, Chris is awesome. And anyways, and I always take that, and that's not my saying, by the way. I'm not that smart to come up with a saying like that, but that is so true. And so I think you have to constantly be thinking about that instead of thinking about the actual job that you're doing or working on, even your employees need to be thinking about that. Like, how can I make this more streamlined and easier? And I think what it does is it does come down to not just the business owner or the people managing the business, but the actual employees have to think that way too. So I think it's a cultural thing. If the employees don't think that way, how to create efficiencies, I think is really hard sometimes, because you can't think of every little detail. I mean, you can, but it just takes a lot of bandwidth.
Well, oh man, there's a lot of questions I have, but I would say most people, though, I don't know if you guys would agree with this, but most people that I run into, probably inherently most of our team members, most of our employees they believe their value is the time that they put in. And it comes from this idea that I don't want, it's a really noble, it's a good place that it comes from. It's like, I don't want to be slacking. I want to give, what I'm being paid for, that kind of thing. But the truth is that if you think just that way, truthfully, it's not the right. Like, you want to be reducing. It's not that you want to work less. It's not a 4-hour work week type thing, but you want to be reducing the time that it takes to deliver the same type of product. That's called innovation, or a part of innovation. And I think that I don't feel that people think that way first. It can be a hard mindset to get into.
Yeah, and I think just because I think we all as humans strive to make sure that we're seen as valuable. And, I think that's part of the culture of the agency culture that we all talk about, maybe even in a negative way, that is, not great for you or your family, because you're there all day, all night, right, at the agency. And there used to be a thing where, I think it was hard because it's a very competitive industry. Number one, it's very competitive from an employee standpoint. But you see these guys, that are working, and they're staying 2 hours later than you, right? Are they working harder, getting more done, or are they just less efficient?
It's that perception.
Yeah,
right.
perception.
For years
and so
years.
what is that? Where the person's leaving at 5 o'clock, right on the dime. Have they just got their crap together, and they're just more efficient, and they know how to get things done? Or are they just putting boundaries up for boundaries, which everyone needs to do in this industry? You got to put your own boundaries up.
Well, let me, it's funny because I asked myself this. I'm like, would I be okay if people were leaving at 3 o'clock? I'm like, no.
Well, yeah.
Would I be okay am I okay with people leaving at, like, working until 9 o'clock? No.
Yeah. Why? We went through a phase
9 to 5, baby.
Yeah. We went through a phase.
And I'm so against the 9 to 5 thing too. There's these perceptions, but I think there is a valid thing around the 9 to 5, by the way. Like, there's an availability that is expected from, I guess, the rest of the culture, right? And so if you're not available in a normal time, that's not really great service. So I think that there's a valid thing. But
I listened to somebody talk recently. Actually, it's a book I'm reading. I take that back. It's a historian and a philosopher, and anyway, he was talking about, and I'll throw this out there because I think it pertains to what we're talking about. He's talking about when we were, let's say, before agrarian societies, hunter-gatherers, and there's still hunter-gatherer societies today. You go to the Amazons, or you go to some cultures, and you think about that lifestyle that all human beings at one point were hunter-gatherers. You did not have a set time where you got up and you said, all right, it's time to go hunt and gather today. I'll see you at 5 o'clock, babe. No, you just traveled from place to place wherever you could get the thing.
It's opportunistic.
Exactly. And so you think about the Native Americans in the United States and their lifestyles. They would go and be, okay, we've heard there's some buffalo 5 miles away. We're going to pick up our tents and we're going to go over there and we're going to spend a few weeks there. And they go and they hunt buffalo for a couple hours and they get them and they enjoy them, and they probably work 2-3 hours a day, and then maybe somebody goes and gets some apples they find or whatever it may be. But that was the culture. So you're creating other environments around maybe spirituality, maybe hobbies, maybe fun, spending time with families. And if you look at those cultures that existed, you had a deep sense of self, of nature, of lots of things, but you also had you didn't have a high priority of 9 to 5, like turning people into commodities. And then the Industrial Revolution started with agrarian societies, right? You had to get up. And I'm going back to this is the 9 to 5, I think, came from when the sun was up and we could go till the land, but we're stuck in this one location and we're having to, it's hard. You have to keep doing it. You can't just go get up and move and go find what you want to eat, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we're stuck in that right now. Whether that's good or bad, that's what we're stuck into, right? We're stuck into this. But is there a way maybe that we could break out of that and go back to a simpler life and say, what is it makes me the most productive, the most creative, the most time I can spend with my family, while at the same time being incredibly productive at the same time?
The challenging thing about that, and I know we're like really on a weird tangent, but the challenging thing I would think is to go back to that. You know, in your first example, the opportunity was not working with, it was working with your people to work to take the opportunity out of the land, which had its own kind of thing. Right now, the land is replaced by other people.
That's right.
And so now people are on the same schedule basically, and they're just kind of agreed schedule.
That's right.
And maybe that's the best way to work on that type of thing. But I do think there are situations, we saw it last year, where we're stuck in a model that doesn't necessarily produce the best results.
That's kind of my point.
And rethinking that, it's funny that's kind of been. I've always rethought those things. I've never been interested in like just accepting, stuff like that.
So Ken, what are the indications for you that you're not the most efficient in doing something, or that you could be more, or you just have a philosophy that anything can be continued to be refined and we can squeak more out of this somehow, some way?
So do you guys? So yeah, I mean, like, how do you guys think about capacity? The way I think about it is, and I'd be curious to know, like at 5x5, how you guys plan and figure out, like, okay, do we have enough people to do this next project, or we just say yes and we figure it out, like that kind of stuff?
I think there's different ways. Obviously, people listening to this are at different phases. There might be a solopreneur, and there might be an agency with 5 people. There might be an agency with 20 people. But so it's different animals and different beasts. But at the end of the day, I think it's all about time management and also what type of efficiencies you're offering. So at 5x5, we have a traffic manager. She has no other job but to look at people's capacities, what's coming down the pike, what you're working on this week, what capacity this department is at. Should you or can you take on new tasks? And she will say, no, you can't. And I will stop it if you try. Not that it can't be overridden, but having a traffic manager is really important, because then it releases the burden off the workers, because the workers are always going, depending on your personality, they'll say yes to everything, right? Or they'll say no when they really do have capacity. If you have an unbiased third party saying, here's what's on your plate this week, you can't handle any more tasks, and I'll make sure nobody within the agency gives you any more. If they do, I'll schedule it for an extra 3 days or a week out or 2 weeks out to get done. So that's huge. I think having someone who does that.
Do you have any tools that you guys use how do you measure? How do they know, okay, we have capacity for this project, or this person does?
Yeah, like if I was a dude and I worked for you guys, and I said to this traffic coordinator, I said, man, I am slammed this week. Like, I can barely breathe. I've got like, a half a project on my plate right now. But is it just sentiment, or
no? We use Accello, ACELLO, I think, or ACELO, and it's basically it's a task time management, pretty robust for agencies. So everything you do has a task, and it has a time allotted, and then it's a timer on it. So at any given time, what a person's day is look like and what they're working on. Now, obviously, you have to be flexible for that. And in management position, you don't put everything in there. But I think it gives a good idea of, how much, and then you can look back and say, how much time did these tasks take?
And that helps you too in the future, obviously, to know if you're doing repetitive type of projects.
Does your sales team ask if we've got capacity for something before they close something?
No. That's the exception, because then it's the traffic coordinator's job, along with the team, to say, okay, if we sold something, we have to look at the forecast and say, what are we promising this client? Like, okay, Mr. New Client, we will start this and get it done within X amount of time based on what we see is available. Mm-hmm. And if we're getting backed up, then you either have to shift things around or you have to hire more people, right?
Right. And I think that's where it comes down to, and that's kind of where I wanted to hone in, is like the answer being just hire more people, to me is, it's acceptable, but when I look at most agencies, the full-time, the FTE to revenue ratio is like not that great, and okay, so we're in the DTC business, e-commerce. We do a lot of the business analysis, and I have been in that world for a while, and I've run companies in that world as well, and you're much closer to pushing 200, 300,000 per full-time employee. And that is, and obviously, like, different businesses are different, but like, you're not, I would say it doesn't matter if it's e-commerce or other businesses, adding a person kind of 1-to-1 for every project, or as you need to for projects, to me, doesn't necessarily, it just doesn't produce the best profit. Not even the best profit. Sometimes for a lot of agencies, I think it produces unhealthy profits.
One of the challenges that I've had over the years is that back in the day, like literally 20 years ago, 15 years ago, in the agency world, you used to look at your employee as like, how many times should I be billing this person versus what their actual cost is? And like, for instance, in our director might be 3 times, right? So you would want to bill 3 times over a year what their full expense was, not only their salary, but all their other expenses on top of that to have them. But the problem is if you look at employee, if you look at those roles and what they made there versus what they make today, there hasn't actually been a huge change in their income, even though around us, the prices have actually become more competitive, or the prices that you can charge go down almost. Yeah. And so that ratio has probably stayed the same pretty much, but now, you're not just making as much off of your employees as you used to. So you have to be very careful now that you can't overwork a project, right? Because you could lose money on the project.
I mean, I've always, a lot of my mentors have said, rule of thumb is like, your goal should be, this has been from the beginning, but I think in general, people say, oh, you make 4 times back on an employee salary that year, right? And so if you think about that, that's, agencies are probably not even doing half that. Yeah. Most agencies that I look at, I tend to be able to. What's funny is I'll be in these circles, and people will generally share their like revenue and employee count and that kind of stuff. So you can make these numbers. You can kind of do this ratio pretty quickly. And I would say most agencies are falling in the 100,000, which to me is basically break even almost, to maybe 120 kind of mark.
Yeah.
I know there's a guy in town who's a big agency consultant, and I believe his mark is, I want to say 175. That is like the healthy mark. Could be wrong. And I've always focused heavily on this, so we're in a healthy zone with it. But it's still this idea that, if you're hitting capacity and you're still, or an average agency does, what happens though is their eyes are bigger than their stomach, and then it causes other issues. But if you're hitting capacity ever, then there's, to me, another question to ask, which is like, how do you expand what you can do with the same amount of people without sacrificing quality?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at not even adding any freelancers or any contractors, to expand quickly when you need specialty. If you're just saying, "Hey, this is my team, and I can't add any more people to it," how do
I'm not saying never add. I'm just saying don't just throw human resources.
Correct. Yeah. Then how can you scale? Man, that is
one of the things that I've done recently is my team. I had to look at and say, we're getting really tight on capacity. People are starting to get. We're starting to get pretty full. And one thing that I like to do is look at the things that we're offering for our clients, meaning the tasks that we're doing, and then start to rank them according to value. And then say those low value things that we're doing just because maybe we've always done it, but they don't really push the bottom line. They don't push the ROI for the client. They don't push conversions really much. How can we adjust those and change those? So for us, for instance, I found us doing a lot of paid ad maintenance things and reporting. And, so when you have a bunch of clients and every week you're doing maintenance and then doing the reporting on that maintenance for the client, when sometimes all it is the spend optimized? Is keywords negated? Yeah, okay. There's really not a lot of value that you're giving to the clients. And so saying for certain clients, maybe their ad spend isn't very high. Maybe, you have a smaller retainer with that client, and you say, can we push that to every 2 weeks? And then every 2 weeks, really spend some quality time on the maintenance for that client, because that's not value that you're giving. It's really cost for us. And I think you can give that client more attention. You say, okay, let's push that out every 2 weeks. And then instead of doing 4 tasks for that client, you're doing 2 really more intense ones, bringing them more value. And then you multiply that time 10 clients, you've just freed up a bunch of space for it. So looking at the tasks, looking at the work, and saying, let's rank it by the value that it really brings the client.
I was gonna say, like the process that I go through is similar, and it's something that we're actually going through right now. But basically, I find that in service businesses, especially agencies, especially as you have more people, you have the potential to get multiples more of inefficiency.
Right.
So because what I mean by that is a task may be straightforward, but it might hit 3, 4, 5 people before it actually gets done, because someone's asking a question, or we're not sure who it goes to, or we need to. So sometimes, and I'm a big systems and process person, but sometimes the system, routing it through the different people that do the different parts in and of itself can cause that inefficiency for certain level tasks. So the system almost has to be matched to like the level of the task or the project, because small projects come through and they become really inefficient when it probably could be done. And where I'm going with this is, I think what I do is I go through, and I'm currently doing this, I go through every single step in our process, and I start looking at things like, are we just going back and forth in communication? Because everything's tracked, and I would recommend everyone tracks everything they do, but like all of our communication generally is like in one spot. And so, does it look like we're bouncing back and forth to get what probably one person could answer in maybe 30 seconds, potentially? Sometimes that happens. And it's no one's fault. Everyone's doing their role. It's just that the workflow has now gotten to the point where this doesn't fit. It doesn't serve that project.
Do you find that sometimes that's driven by the client, basically meaning they're asking a lot of small questions?
I was going to say the second thing is communication.
Yeah.
So we've found that one big area where things get very inefficient is just questions that get asked. They kind of drip in. Some clients are just like, hey, do your thing, don't worry about it. But some clients, there is a personality, they want to talk and kind of stuff, which is totally cool. Like we want to too. It's like if you're at coffee, like, hey, what's going on today?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I have this thing, and that's all great. Not saying that's bad because we want to, because I think it's important to foster that level of relationship at some level, but it also can be very inefficient. It can be the same thing as if you're at a coffee shop and someone's talking and you're trying to work on their project and they're talking to you and asking you questions. Exactly the same thing. So I find those two areas. What I'm kind of getting to is I actually think the time it takes to deliver the work is much less than the time it actually takes to deliver the work with all that, which then goes to, okay, well, how do you, if that's like the value, and maybe it's debatable, is that the only value? I mean, is there value in the relational side? Obviously, this is a hypothetical question, but if that's the value, how do you slim down to that and reduce all the other inefficiency?
I think you have to look at your process too and never be a slave to the process. This is getting back to the example I talked about hunter-gatherers versus industrial societies. Like, we have all these cool tools and processes, and you've got to periodically, every quarter or whatever, look at them and go, how much time did we use on obeying the process that actually cost us an extra 20 hours a week, 40 hours a month, whatever it may be? And like, how can we refine that? Because I know for me, they're necessary and sometimes you just got to bite the bullet. But if I'm sitting there 2 hours a day, putting stuff into a system so that I can track it and be more efficient, and I do that every day, or 3 hours a week, something is wrong. Something is wrong that and then that's why you got to look at it and go, have we really made ourselves better and more efficient, or are we a slave to the process? I think that's the other side of the coin too.
What is that saying about, it takes 90%
two to tango?
Yeah, it does. It's the last, it seems like it's for projects, it's always the last 10% that take the longest.
Yes.
And there's a saying about that, I can't remember, about 90%.
Scope creep?
Well, that too, yeah, scope creep. But it's always like that last mile. Like we're almost there, like we're 90% done, and all of a sudden things just slow down, and it's like, what's going on? But one of the things that
it's like in sports, like the focus. I believe it's focus. Like the focus multiplies to close out.
And a lot of times, what we find is clients will start to get 90% there, then they'll see it all come together, and then they start to get hyper picky, and that's where the scope creep comes in, because they start to want to make changes at the 90% mark, and I think that's also one of the things that and that's basically training your customer on the process and where the decisions can no longer be made. You don't make decisions when you're 95% done, you make them earlier. And so, and in trying to do those are processes too. One of the things that I found with employees is that they don't think about efficiencies. It's just not in their realm of thinking when they do their daily work. Now, if it was their own money, they probably would. But since they're spending someone else's money, they sometimes don't even see that. They don't think that way. But I think it starts with baby steps. So if you can have your employees and have the people that work for you start to come to you with like small little efficiency things, like every week or something, you guys talk about what are ways that you find that maybe you could change efficiencies or things that we're doing things in the agency. Number one, it gives them some input. It gives them some ownership. As long as it's not like, hey, maybe if I move my desk closer to the bathroom, I'll save a few seconds of walking or something, but sometimes it starts there. It literally starts with some like, okay, Jimmy, that's great, but let's, you know what I mean? But it's just really a culture of thinking. It's a way of thinking. And most employees will be like, wow, I've never really even thought about that.
Well, it's also hard because then it takes, you start getting into judgment calls, right? So, let's say something like, I don't know, this is super geeky, but like Q&A testing, right? You do Q&A testing and like for some, there's a certain amount that there's like certain level of things that's like overly picky, which you wouldn't touch. But that alone, but in order to do that, in order to say, hey, you know what, I'm getting to a place where this is inefficient, this is not an issue, or whatever, that takes a judgment call that sometimes I think employees don't feel like they even have the authority to make, which is say, I shouldn't be doing this thing because it's not a good use of my time. Because that's on one end, and and me doing it because I've been asked to do it is on the other end.
Yeah. And there's certain things that we do. For instance, when we send something out that is going to be printed or like an e-blast that you can't redact and you can't bring back. Like once you send it, it's gone. Or a social, maybe even a social post is the same thing. We always want two separate people proofing it. Now that sometimes that seems overdone because of time frames. Like we got to get two people to review it, and sometimes that's a lot of time when you're talking about like a 20-page website that has a lot of depth and spelling errors that could occur. Because what we found in the past is that one person, even if they're a great editor or a great proofer, will always miss something. And for some clients, you just can't afford the risk because it's just too high of a risk to have anything wrong. And so we do spend sometimes the extra time and energy on that, even though it can feel a little bit like, man, that's a lot of time to put two people just proofing after everything's all said and done, pretty much. But we found that it's really necessary. In fact, in my past history, I've made mistakes that have been very costly because we've only had one person proof versus two people. Like we know we probably would have caught it. In fact, sometimes you have things that still are missed after two people's eyes on it. So the question is, how do you get? There's probably technology that can help that, and it's only going to be better in the future. But how do you continue to look at those things and go, okay, this is still valuable to spend this extra time, and this isn't. And I think for me, just even these discussions make me think of like, man, I really got to get back on that train again of trying to dig a little deeper because there's more inefficiencies in my agency that I know I can resolve.
Well, here's the thing. The reason I bring it up, and I would say one of the takeaways here is I think it's something that someone in the business needs to be looking at all the time, or at least regularly, because it gets away from you so fast, especially the bigger you get, right? Like it would be really easy for 5x5 to go through a year and have no profit.
Right.
It would be really easy for that to happen, or lose money.
Yeah. Anytime you have lots of employees and everyone's just churning, and no one is responsible for saying, what's our profit margin on these? What's efficiency? And not only that, what you said is lose profitability, but you burn people out. And that's that. And we can save that for our next episode. But just like, what's the culture you're creating to create efficiency and scalability? Like, I believe it's about the culture of the environment. That's where you got to start.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think it's both end.
It's both and, yeah.
But maybe we can extend this because we should get into that, and even the product line that you sell, I think, also influences it. But I will say this: like what I started doing a while ago, and I would encourage everyone to do, is I have a really simple business metric dashboard, and because obviously your business needs to have profit. And it has to have a certain amount of profit. We've talked about that in the past, like how much to have those kind of things. But it has to have that in order to thrive, because profit actually isn't really profit, because you probably have to reinvest that into things like R&D and getting better at what we do and that kind of stuff. So even when you say you have profit, it's not even like going into a pocket of anybody. You need profit just to be able to get better at what you do. And so I find in agencies it can be really hard to do that because it's difficult to install the right measuring tools across the agency so that you can actually measure hours and profitability and that kind of thing. And then you have to put someone in charge of project profitability. So each project's like a mini business, right? It's got its own P&L basically. And we actually have someone in charge of that, but for each project, which was a huge turning point years ago. And I would recommend everyone do that. They're just in charge of how healthy is the project, and it's feedback to the sales team and to the product team, and we get just better and better at it. That's the goal. But I would have a business dashboard, and if anything, at the minimum, I think full-time FTE, full-time equivalent, because a lot of businesses like have a bunch of freelancers and those kind of things. Full-time equivalent to revenue, just figuring out what the ratio is, and if it's close to 100,000, I think there's an issue. And you're probably not making any profit or enough profit to invest back in. And that may seem selfish, but it's not. I see that as like the only way you can really serve your clients well is if you're a healthy, we've talked about, you just like in the airplanes, you put when we used to fly, you put your mask on first before you help other people. It's like you have to be a healthy business in order to create value for other people, and so.
But you said,
how do those things.
You said something about someone monitoring the P&L or the profitability for each project. I think that's such a key. Is it's really hard for us as business owners, especially when you're a solopreneur or you have a small agency, to really monitor every task and look at it. But I don't see how you can be efficient and scale without really digging into that. Meaning, do you have a way to track tasks that everyone's doing so that you can go back and say, this is interesting. Why does Mary only take an hour to do this regular task and Bill takes 2 hours? Every time Bill does this task, it takes him 2 hours, but Mary only takes an hour. What's going on there? What's the difference? Can we figure that out? Is he maybe needs a different skill set? Do they all need to go to Mary? Can Mary teach something? Those kind of things. If no one's like looking at that kind of stuff, I think it's impossible to get efficient.
That's very complex.
Well, you can't
obviously.
you can't manage what you can't measure.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a challenge, right? How do you? First of all, you got to be able to measure that to be able to identify those things, and then you got to basically say, and maybe what was his name, Bill?
Yeah.
Maybe Bill just needs to learn from Mary.
Exactly.
And
That's
maybe he's overdoing stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think yes, it's complex, but I'd be willing to bet anybody who has more than a solopreneur does things regularly for clients.
Yeah.
And that's part of our business. And if you've got to be looking at those things and measuring them somehow.
Well, what I realized in my career, if we don't teach an employee how to do something, they're going to just figure it out themselves and do it their own way, which may or may not be as efficient as you think they could, or as efficient as it can be. And sometimes I've found that there's our employees that just think that way, and they're like, "Wow, you're doing it better and faster than I even." You're doing some cool shortcuts that actually don't hurt the quality but save time. And there's times where it's the opposite, where you're like, "Ooh, you gotta." And so you gotta. The thing is, you've always got to make sure that for every individual, their role has to be fully defined. Otherwise, they won't do it how you want it done.
Not only that, but I would say. The value of your business is what I call the formula of how you deliver the product you deliver.
Yeah.
And so that implies that it's like Coke, right? I would say the value of an agency is like essentially, you have formulas that you have proprietary formulas of success, right? And you've developed them. That is your value, I believe, like business value is that IP. If you don't, so you have to figure out something that's successful, then you have to write it down and codify it, and then you have to teach it to people.
Yeah.
But if you don't teach to people and you just bring people on, then if you think about it that way, this is how I think about it. I'm like, it's like, what if, Coke just hired some guy and they're like, okay, I'm just going to put a little more sugar in this one. Put a little more, whatever, they put aspartame or something like that. It wouldn't be Coke. And I don't like Coke, but
it'd be Pepsi. Pepsi's more sweet.
Well, that's a great visual example though.
Yeah,
because,
it is.
Because you're right. You're pulling people from different places, and then you're just saying, "Oh, I'm hiring you because you know how to do this, so go do this." Versus, I'm hiring you because you know how to do this. Let me show you how we do it. Let me train you on it, and if you could make it better for us, please do. But don't just let them go.
Yeah, it's not about not having a feedback loop, because I think getting better is important. And when you hire, like I see people do this all the time, they'll try and hire like a sales manager or someone to run sales, and they hire someone who's great at sales, and then they just say, "Okay, go do sales," and they start doing it their way. And who knows if that'll work or not? And now this person may be really good, but I think you've got to. You or whoever's leading or whoever's been in your business for a long time is the only one that knows what has worked so far, how we do things. And I would encourage everyone to have some sort of pedigree or intentionality about how they do those things, and codify that, because that is your IP. That's like a big part of your value, I believe. And then you bring someone in who's really good. It's like, okay, Phil Jackson, one of the best coaches in the NBA, right? Like Michael Jordan is the best player of all time. Phil had the triangle offense. That was like his philosophy and I'm getting geeky on basketball, I get it, but like it was a certain type of offensive structure. it was not around, and if you ever watched The Last Dance, which is just awesome, by the way, you'll learn about this, but it was not around one person scoring all the time. So it actually took the ball out of Michael Jordan's hands most of the time. But it won. It was what won them 6-7 championships, whatever it was. So he had the triangle offense, and he could have said, Mike, do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And just, you're the best basketball player in the world, like do whatever you want. And that's what the coaches before him did. But he said, no, look, I have this philosophy. It's the winning philosophy. And you're the best basketball player in the world. How can you improve this? Let's work together. But this is the structure.
Right. That's good.
This is the winning structure. And they won 7 championships.
That's awesome. Let's continue this conversation because I think that opens up a whole nother discussion level.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. Until next time.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Bye.